I want to share Duncan McNeill's disappointment at the need for this debate, but I do want to congratulate the committee for their report. I think it's a very well-written report, and I think it's clear from the evidence to the committee that although this is an incredibly complex issue to solve, as John Wilson has just commented, the longer it takes to get this resolved, it becomes more complex and it becomes more difficult to resolve. So what we do need here is some political will to actually make sure that we get to some sensible resolution. We do need leadership from the Scottish Government, not to impose, but to send a clear message that faster progress on working towards resolution needs to be made. And we need to think through, as Duncan McNeill outlined, a strategy that was advocated by the committee to work through the categories in the thousands, the tens of thousands of cases, so that progress can be made. The report does suggest a way forward, and the key recommendation that I think that needs to be focused on is about pay audits to check the outcomes of this whole process, because I think there's a danger that there's smoke and mirrors here. We need to inject some political urgency into this debate, because delivering on the ambition of equal pay is not a holy grail. It should be a realisable political goal. Why should women be paid lower wages when they're doing a work of equal value, requiring similar skills or training? It's completely unfair, completely unacceptable. And women have lost out because of the slow rate of progress made in this issue. They've missed out on their past pay, but they're missing out on their future opportunities. And the whole process has treated them like second-class citizens. It is scandalous that there is a lack of resolution to this, principally not just because of the problems that have been there in the past, but because we're not in a standstill position. For those women workers, things are getting worse. If you look at what's happening in Edinburgh, my own area, the Liberal SNP Council has decided to investigate outsourcing a fifth of their staff just this week, and the clear objective is to cut their salary bill. Well, it will solve the single status problem. Once low-paid women workers are transferred to the private sector, their pay will be a private matter, it will be hidden by commercial confidentiality, and we will lose the accountability on the quality of service provision. So any gains that have been made in terms of job re-evaluation will be lost. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a council briefing on home care services, predominantly provided by women workers. There's been some innovative redesign work. Investment will free up resources. There will be improved quality for people needing support. But buried in the backdrop to that work, buried in their statistics, was an admission that the council planned to outsource, i.e. privatise, their home care services. They plan to shift from 55% in-house provision to 25% in-house provision. And the council freely admit they want to cut costs and they want to bring down their wages bill. Now, any savings are going to be paid for by the lowest paid workers, predominantly women, and their cuts in their salaries will be paid to private directors, so there's going to be no equality of treatment here. Hasn't anything been learnt from the cost of privatising services in the NHS, where services had to be brought back in-house? And I'm already dealing with complaints about the quality of care provision by private companies. Hours cut, unreliable services, a huge turnover in staff. And the last thing that vulnerable clients need is to lose out. And women are going to lose out twice. They're predominantly the vulnerable clients and they're predominantly the hard-working carer staff on lower pay. And the costs are going to come in their pay. Now, we know in the future that we're going to have a demographic shift. We're all going to live longer and we're going to have less young people going into the labour market. So how are we going to make those caring jobs, those jobs predominantly held by women in our local authorities, attractive to young people in the future, if we're cutting back on terms and conditions and we're cutting back on the hours that are going to be paid and we're cutting back on part-time workers in particular? So this is not a standstill debate about equal pay. This is a debate where the legacy of inaction over the last few years has meant that there are women who have lost out already, but they're going to lose out doubly in the future. Yes, I do have time.
John Wilson.
Thank you, Ms Boyack, for giving way. But this isn't a problem of the last few years. Would the member agree that this has been a problem for the last 10 years? And the inaction by local authorities throughout Scotland, including Labour-led local authorities, has actually led to this problem being exacerbated.
Boyack.
Absolutely. That's why I shared completely with Duncan McNeill's introduction, that it was a tragedy that this has not been solved. While it is a complex issue, it needs political will. But the problem is that we've now got to the point that it's getting worse. And the solutions being adopted by local authorities, and I have to say the example of my local authority in Edinburgh, where they are going to look at taking 20% of existing council staff out of council provision and send them to the private service, is the wrong solution. They need to be sitting down with their unions, they need to be sitting down with COSLA, and that's why, no thank you, I've just taken an intervention, that's why we do need action, and we need constructive action. We do not need a blame game, we need action now. And we've had this in the chamber before. If the member had been here in previous years, she would have known the passion across this chamber from all the political parties about the need to get momentum to get this resolved. I hope today we'll actually see momentum in getting a solution, because what's happening now is that some job re-evaluations are actually widening the gap. If you look at what's happening in the home care services in Edinburgh, the situation is being made worse. What does it say about our capital city, that with some of the highest living costs in Scotland, the pay and prospects of some of our most poorly paid women workers are going to get worse? That cannot be right. We need action now, and I hope the tenor of this debate across the chamber and the specific recommendations from the committee, with the fact that in the past the Cabinet Secretary himself has been involved in this debate, that we can see cross-party, not just in political terms, but cross-party in terms of COSLA, the councils, the trade unions and the Scottish Government, will have some sense of urgency to this debate, so that in 3 years' time, whoever is in this Parliament will not be back debating the issue when thousands of women workers will not just have lost out, but their job prospects and the services for people that they care for are actually going to have been made worse. That's unacceptable. We cannot let that happen.